and I'm just making a loony statement, but it's just so powerful, the urge to get back at the other person when we feel hurt and angry, rather than to share it, and as a chance to be vulnerable and to have a more loving relationship.
Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David, and welcome everyone around the country and the world and the galaxy. This is the Feeling Good podcast, and we are at episode 424. Today we're talking about disarming, giving and receiving critical conflict. And even though last week Jill Levitt
Giving and
practiced
receiving what? Say that again.
giving and receiving critical feedback.
Oh, okay. Critical,
Sorry.
negative feedback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Critical or negative. Okay.
And last week, Jill Levitt did a very good job with no practice when we invited her onto the podcast again. But luckily, we got her to change her mind. And she is here again on our podcast.
That means I failed in the no practice last week.
Yeah.
You're right. That was a good pickup.
Yeah.
And Jill,
Yeah.
as everyone knows, is the director of training for the Feeling Good Institute. And she's going to talk in a little bit about a training that David and Jill are putting on December 6th. But first, I would love to read a podcast endorsement that an anonymous person sent to us. And she wrote, "You've been helping me since the mid-1990s, when a therapist I was seeing first prescribed your book. And I can't say thank you enough. I've also worked..."
Which book was that?
Feeling Good.
Is that the one that's now available on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
I just want to make sure.
it's available in paperback on Amazon at a very, very reasonable price. "So I can't thank you enough," she wrote. Or he, because I don't know if it was anonymous. "I've also worked personally with therapists, a team CBT therapists at the Feeling Good Institute, who were really great. But as you know, therapy can be expensive. Then I found your app, and I can't tell you how good it feels to have access to help all day long at any time of the day. And the sound of your voice, Dr. Burns, in the educational portion is so reassuring to me. I think I'm finding a little key that sort of opens a door in my heart, which lets the pain out. And the app actually helped me get there by asking me the right questions. It's unbelievable. I'm so grateful, and I'm going to share about the app with as many people as I can. I want to thank you again for your loving help for so many people." Anonymous.
Well, thank you so much, Anonymous. Your kind words mean so much to me, to Rhonda, to Jill, and to everybody on our app team. It just you made our day, and really appreciate you. And I also wanted to mention that this is Thanksgiving week, and and I think a lot of people's favorite holiday, because it's not about shopping and commercialism. It's about hanging out with family and enjoying a beautiful meal together, and a kind of a loving, close family time. And it's just, and of course, turkey is my favorite, and dressing my favorite meal, cranberry sauce and all that good stuff. So we wish you all a lot of love, and hope you're with people that you love and who love you on this most important holiday.
Tell us about the December 6th workshop.
Yes, thanks, Rhonda. So David and I are putting on a day-long workshop that is called "I'm Not Good Enough: CBT Tools and Techniques for Improving Self-Esteem." And feeling not good enough seems to be one of the most common things that therapists and patients all struggle with. And so in this workshop, we'll be teaching, team CBT tools and techniques. It is a therapist training. It's meant for therapists to learn skills to use with their patients. And it's on December 6th from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Offers 7 CEs, and something that's cool is it's the first hybrid workshop we're doing since before COVID, other than the intensive, meaning that we're going to be doing it in person in Mountain View at this beautiful Palo Alto University classroom sort of setting, auditorium setting. And then we're also going to be live streaming it online, so you can attend it from anywhere in the world. And David, do you want to say anything else about the workshop?
I just want to thank Palo Alto University for partnering with us in this workshop, and I hope it's a great success and people love it. And maybe we'll have a chance to do other cool things with Palo Alto University, which is a place that I just have tremendous admiration and respect for. They kind of came into existence not long ago and have really blossomed, and especially in the mental health space, training psychologists, PhD, clinical psychology, PsyD, and a lot of neat stuff like that. And then I had one other super important thing to say.
Let me say one more thing, and maybe you'll think of it. But the workshop itself is typical for us, that we're going to be doing some didactic teaching, but we're going to be doing lots of demonstrations. We're going to be using video from a live therapy session that we did with a wonderful woman named Tammy. And we're going to be giving you guys tons of opportunity to practice. So whether you're online or in person, you're going to be doing a lot of practice of skills, getting feedback. So you're actually going to be a better therapist, by the end of the day.
Yes, and the thing I was going to try to remember to say is that in our Tuesday group, when we ask how many of you sometimes feel and suffer because you tell yourself, I'm not good enough, put your hands up, over 90% of the hands go up instantly. And so we'll be giving you the chance to kind of work on your own stuff too. So you go out of the workshop not only with fabulous, powerful, mind-boggling, jaw-dropping, and somewhat above average techniques to use with your patients, but also a bit of a death and rebirth experience for yourself, where you're suddenly giving up this idea that you need to be special, or that you need to be better than you are to have joy and full effectiveness and working with your patients, your clients, but also in loving yourself and accepting yourself and feeling a sense of joy just for being alive. Like I'm feeling joy right now, just being able to be with my wonderful Rhonda and wonderful Jill. And it's great to enjoy life without having to figure out if you're good enough and waste time on a lot of worthless worrying.
And we should tell them where they can register, right? Which is if they go to the Feeling Good Institute website. So it's www.feelinggoodinstitute.com. And then for training, therapist training section, you'll see the workshop posted there.
And so hope you can come. Jill and I will both be there with tears, with laughter, and with the joy we have teaching together and bringing things to life in a way that will hopefully really matter to you if we have the good luck of seeing you at our workshop on December 6th.
Yeah, and as someone who's been the recipient of teaching from both of you together at the intensive, the two of you together are very magical, and it's really a joy to be one of your students.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the magic we not only want to demonstrate, but we want to give and share. So you can take that magic with you and bring it into your life and into your clinical work. Because for me, clinical work is magic. I was on a fellow's podcast on Friday. His podcast is called Philosophical Weightlifting. And I thought, man, that's right up my alley, because I was a philosophy major in college, and what a neat concept that is. But we really clicked it off, clicked together. I mean, he wonderful a wonderful fellow. And at the end, he said, "Well, could you demonstrate a couple of the techniques?" And I said, "Absolutely. Do you have some negative thoughts?" And here's this handsome, hunky, weightlifting, brilliant, awesome fellow suddenly, having all these "I'm not good enough" thoughts. I'll never find love, and man alive. I mean, after women see him on our podcast and his podcast, he'll be deluged with marriage offers. But it's so neat to see when others reveal their suffering that I mean, he looks great on the outside. Inside, he was just dying. And during an hour session, all of his negative feelings went to zero. And it was such a touching, wonderful experience. And we hope to show you guys how to do that on the day of December 6th for yourself and for the people you interact with.
Nice. Okay, well, let's jump into today's podcast. And today's
aren't we done now?
Well, today's podcast is on giving and receiving critical or negative feedback. And this came out of, I asked David and Jill a question because they're such great teachers in the Tuesday group, and they really are so supportive of the Wednesday group teaching. And one week, we asked for people to fill out feedback forms at the end of every class, which is really important for the person who's doing the teaching to understand what they did and how they did, and that influenced the participants and the learners. And in the Wednesday group, we've changed the format now, so each participant is taking a turn teaching a class. They get to learn how to teach, people get to learn how to teach, and they also, when you teach, you learn. So it's really a great experience for everyone at different levels. And one week, hardly anyone in the Wednesday group filled out their feedback forms. And then when I asked people about it, they said they had a lot of negative feedback or critical feedback for that previous week's teacher, and they didn't know how to give feedback that wasn't like super positive. So they chose not to give any feedback. And I thought, gee, that might be an interesting podcast. How do you give critical feedback? And also, how do you accept it when it's given to you?
Yeah, that's great. By the way, some wise person, I don't know who, once said, when you say nothing, you're shouting loudly. And what do you think, Rhonda, about that giving feedback by saying nothing?
Well, it's very anxiety provoking, because you're only guessing you have to guess what the other people are thinking, and so often we project negative thoughts onto the other person. It could be worse than what they really would be saying.
Right. What else does it convey, would you say, Jill?
Not get withholding feedback. You're asking when you're asked for
negative feedback, refusing
feedback.
to talk.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it definitely conveys kind of a lack of trust, right? Like if I don't think that I can give you feedback, then I'm kind of telling you I don't think you could handle feedback. So I think it definitely gives a negative sense sort of about the relationship.
Yeah. And also, you're not worth the air that comes out of my mouth.
Right, sure.
And I have such a negative view of you that you couldn't tolerate any criticism. So you're kind of telling the person you're such a loser, you're not worth my interaction at all. I think it's very, very harsh criticism, to be honest.
Yeah. And I mean, it definitely reveals, again, this would be like a label, but it reveals sort of a sense of laziness on the part of the person not giving the feedback, right? In other words, it's hard to give negative feedback. So deciding not to is kind of, as you said, like, it's not worth my time versus like working hard to figure out how can I give this person, constructive criticism, right? Respectful, kind, caring, but constructive criticism.
And it's also easy to go to the opposite extreme of giving your feedback in a very harsh way, especially if it's anonymous. And so it gives you kind of chance to throw spitballs at someone you're pissed off at rather than, relating to them with respect. And I've been on the giving and receiving end of both kinds of feedback as recently as yesterday, to be honest. So it's a great topic, which if you hadn't come up with it, Rhonda, I'm sure I would have.
You're so funny. So Jill, you changed the semantics. I don't know if you even noticed, but I really like it. The way, I was talking about negative criticism and you're talking about constructive criticism.
Yeah. Right. I mean, again, because I think we all believe this is what we do as therapists and as teachers. We all believe that feedback is so important, right? And so useful. So negative meaning I've got some things I think you could do differently, right? But constructive, because I mean, as the presenter, if I'm receiving feedback, or as a therapist, if I'm receiving feedback and it's negative, the goal is that it's going to be helpful to me, right? I'm going to learn from it. So yes, I think the giver and the receiver should always be thinking about feedback as constructive, right? The goal is for me to get better.
Yeah. And I don't know anyone who gives negative feedback in a more gracious and lovely way than yourself, Jill. But I have dedicated a poem to this episode. And it's by Robert Frost, called Fire and Ice. I remember I had to memorize it in high school, I think. But it goes, some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and will suffice. And it's obvious what it means, but for those who don't understand it, I would say it's just about the fact that there's hatred. Two ways to express your hatred. One is through aggression, fire, putting somebody down in a mean way. And then the other is being cold and freezing someone out and saying nothing. And we're trying to talk about an intermediate way of providing feedback. And Jill, you were, and I'm often not as good as Jill, or probably Rhonda too, because I'm pretty direct in the way I give feedback, and it sometimes comes across too harshly, and people are afraid of me, and then they won't give me feedback, and then that pisses me off further. But you were mentioning a patient that we mentioned previously on the show, but a patient I just couldn't stand when I was in clinical practice, because he would come to sessions, smelling like pee, like he had pee all over him, and I had cloth furniture, and it would smell up the office, and it would take it was Philadelphia and it was cold, and I'd have to open the windows, and got chilly in the office, and took a week for the smell to leave, and then he'd come back for another session, and he talked in disgusting ways, and I kept wishing he'd drop out of therapy. And every time he came for a session, my heart sank. And I was thinking, I'm going to have to tell him that I can't stand him and don't like him and wish he'd go away. And how do you say that in a loving way? And then I found a way to tell him that, and that was actually brought us much closer and transformed our relationship. But it took me 2 or 3 weeks to build up the courage to do it, because it was hard. But once I figured, here's an angle, here's a way I could share it with him. And what I told him, it was I have something to tell you that might seem a little harsh or a little upsetting, and my goal isn't to drive you away, but to bring us back closer together. Would you be willing to be open to my telling you that? So I call that, the getting permission phase. And he said he was fine. And then I said, your parents sent you here. He was about 23, because they were afraid that you didn't have friends and you were living at home and that you didn't have any social connections with people. And so they sent you to me, and you're paying me to see me. And I actually have found that I kind of like you, but at the same time, I'm pissed off at you, and I start wishing you would drop out of therapy, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but or how often you bathe, but you have a strong smell of urine, and it stays on the furniture after you leave, and other patients have commented on it. And I think they find it puzzling and kind of uncomfortable, as I do. And then you haven't done your psychotherapy homework at all, and you kind of talk about pretty disgusting things during the session. And then I thought, oh wow, this is really great, because that's why you came, that you don't have any connections with people. You're kind of alone and lonely. And I'm someone who likes you, and yet I feel pushed away by you. If I feel fantasizing, oh, I wish he wouldn't come to sessions anymore. And that's the very problem that you're struggling with. And so I thought, wow, then maybe if I tell you, we could talk it over and solve that between the two of us, and then you could begin to solve it with other people as well. And he was just fine with that. And he came back the next week all cleaned up, and he'd done his homework, and he became really delightful to work with. But that was a time when I had to give negative feedback. And it was particularly difficult because I had a power over him, because I was the shrink or the authority type figure. And I had to find a really kindly way of saying to him, you stink, and type of thing. But you can always find a way to share feedback in a way that would be respectful. And then I'm on the receiving end of it too. I get hate mail every now and then, or feedback from a presentation I generally did at a conference, and somebody wrote, that my voice was boring, and they get sick of me constantly criticizing therapists for not using measurement and something else. And that's why I love today's comment from the woman who said my voice was reassuring.
Oh.
But I get a lot of insensitive criticism, and if you get criticism that's insensitive, then you also want to ask yourself, what am I doing that triggers this hostility? And look at yourself as well, and say, am I creating an environment where people feel safe and welcomed to criticism? Do I make them feel good about being critical? There's my bit.
I was just thinking about something that about the spirit with which you gave that feedback to the patient, David, that I think we always think about, which is, if you're giving someone critical or negative feedback, what is your purpose, right? So like your purpose with this patient was to provide something that would be helpful to him and find a way to connect.
And to bring us closer.
And to bring you closer, right? And when we ask for feedback and when we give feedback in our classes and with our patients, it's always, giving feedback is always with the spirit of actually helping that other person to get better. And so, of course, if you're really angry with someone and you're just trying to get them and you're just trying to stick it to them, it's going to be really hard for you to give feedback in a pleasant and helpful and constructive way, right? But if your goal is to help this other person to get better, to give them helpful negative feedback, then obviously what stems from that, as long as your motivation is positive, then we can talk more about like the how to, right? How to give that negative feedback in a way that's positive or palatable or helpful.
What you just said is pure gold, Jill, and that on some level can't be taught. If someone, human beings have been wanting to get revenge and to hurt the people we don't like for thousands of years, and people will deny it. But as Carl Jung pointed out, we all have that shadow, and you can deny it, but you're just full of shit. That's what Carl Jung said. That's his most favorite quote. But that's not true. But it's essentially what he was saying.
Paraphrasing him.
And so if you want to hurt someone that you're critical of, then we can't teach you any techniques that will be. You don't need any techniques because you already know how to be hostile. It comes naturally to you, doesn't it? But if you do have the desire to have a better connection with someone, then there's a lot you can learn about how to give feedback in a way that will go down well, and you're never guaranteed that someone won't get defensive, even if you use the most superb techniques. The other person might lash out at you and defend themselves, and then you've got to give up your attempt to give them feedback and go into listening mode with disarming technique, thought and feeling, empathy, inquiry, and that type of thing. But tell us, Jill and Rhonda, what are the things that I, the podcast listener, should think about if I want to give negative feedback to my partner or my son or my someone who's working for me, or my boss, or to David, and well, not David because he wouldn't need negative feedback, but Michelle or Rhonda or wherever. What are the secrets of being an expert at giving negative feedback?
Well, what you just did was sort of similar to changing the focus, wasn't it? Where you stopped the process of the therapy, and you described what was going on, and then you issued the invitation, you got the buy-in from him to have the conversation, and then you use stroking and I feel statements and
Now let's see. Let's talk about I feel statements. Let's bring these things to life. What's the difference between saying I felt uncomfortable in our dialogue yesterday when you called me? That was a very awkward and I felt very hurt when we were talking. What's the difference between saying that and saying when you called yesterday, you were just very critical and insensitive?
First one was using the I feel statement, right?
Yeah.
And sharing your feelings openly. And the second one was blaming and accusing the other person.
Right. So is this an I feel statement? I felt pissed off when you.
Well, in your example, you said, I kind of like you, which is a minimal I feel statement.
Can you answer my question first?
No, your question was, if you say, I feel pissed when you, is that still an I feel statement?
Is that a I feel statement?
I mean, I would say that technically when you say I feel pissed, that is sharing an I feel statement. But as soon as it's followed with when you, it just sounds like blame sounds like, a bunch of blame. And the question is, the listener can go, well, what would it feel like if someone said, I feel pissed when you, like all you would hear is when you, and then you would just become defensive.
Right. So come back. You made the hugely important point, Rhonda, of I feel statements. But what I'm saying, tell us a little bit about skillful and unskillful I feel statements. That was kind of what I was driving at.
Well, what I really liked about what you did was when you talked about your smelly patient, is you just said, I kind of like you and I'm also pissed at you, without an explanation or a blame, and without a declarative statement. Like sometimes when people say an I feel statement, they don't follow it with a feeling word. They follow it with a declarative statement, like I feel you smell, or I feel this isn't going very well. And those are not I feel statements. Those are explanations, or those are.
Well, how about this one? I feel like you're being real unreasonable.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a good blame.
Yeah. Well, is it okay to say, I just feel like you're wrong and you won't admit it? Sure.
Yeah. That would feel good to say, but no, that would not be an I feel statement.
Yeah. What would be an I feel statement, Rhonda,
Oh,
instead of that?
I feel hurt, I feel confused, I feel upset, irritated, I feel
Yeah.
angry,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel followed by a feeling word, right?
I feel
Yeah.
regret.
And some people actually literally need to print out a list of feeling words, right? You can easily find them online. And I know, David, you have them, but just like actually know what is an emotion, what is a feeling word. And we would say that you
Yeah.
can share any feeling with someone if you share it in a way that is shining light on you, right? Sharing your
Yeah.
experience rather than quickly turning to blame the other person.
Yeah. People used to say, when should you make a hurtful interpretation to a patient? Because some patients, within 30 seconds of meeting them for the first time, you feel like you hope you never have to see them again. They can sense your weakness. They can stick the knife in and twist it, and you're already feeling pissed off and defensive and angry and resentful. And my answer has always been, you can make any interpretation to any patient at any time you wish, including within 30 seconds of meeting them for the first time. But as long as you say it in a way that'll make them feel like $1 million, rather than will be tearing away at their self-esteem. And I think that's one of the principles, if you're willing to adopt it, that when you give negative feedback, it's to bring out the best in the other person, to be helpful to them, and to develop a closer relationship.
I can say a little bit. My mom and I actually have a very close relationship, and my mom has a bunch of kind of physical ailments, and I visit her often. And I think one of the reasons that we're so close is that I am totally honest with her when I'm feeling upset with her, and I always try to do it in a way that's loving and caring, but also really honest and direct. And I mean, I can give an example of that if that's helpful, but I would just say that, like, she always says to me, at the end of a visit like that, she'll sometimes have even some tears and feel kind of sad or bad, but she's always like, thank you so much for being so honest with me. Like, it means so much to me to know that we have such an open relationship, that you trust that you can share your feelings with me.
Will you give us an example?
Yeah, give
Yeah.
us an example.
Sure. I'm trying to think. Like, the most recent example, I don't know if this is hard to follow, but hopefully not. So my mom, and this probably happens with other people who are kind of taking care of their loved ones as well. So my mom sent a text to, my mom was having a particularly hard week, and we're in touch a lot. I kind of always know what's going on with her. And she sent the kind of a lengthy dump of a text to my brother and I saying, like, I've been trying so hard not to burden you and not to tell you all the things that are going on, but I just wanted to tell you that this week, this happened and that happened and the other thing happened. And so I read this text and I thought to myself, actually, I feel really kind of hurt and a little bit pissed off, because I felt like the undercurrent of the text was, you guys don't know how hard things are for me. And in my brain, of course, I could have just been empathic and everything would have blown over. But in my brain, I'm thinking, man, I talk to this woman, or text her nearly every day. Every problem she laid out in her text that was saying, I haven't been sharing it with you, and I just want you to know how much I'm going through, are things I had walked her through and literally helped her to problem solve. So I actually felt hurt, and I felt like it was a little bit of a passive aggressive text on her part. She was probably feeling kind of lonely and uncared for in that moment. So again, I could have let it go and let it blow over and give her the benefit of the doubt because she's struggling, and be empathic and just say, sorry, things are so hard, Mom. I'll, see you Friday. But I didn't respond via text. I basically said, sorry, things are so hard, Mom, and I'll see you Friday, in text. And then when I saw her in person, I said, Mom, I want to talk to you about the last text that you sent to me and Paul. And I'm sure that when you sent that text, you were feeling really overwhelmed and really alone with all the things that you've been struggling with. And I know that that must be really hard for you. but I want to let you know that like how I was feeling when I read that text was really, I was feeling really hurt, and I was feeling like really discounted in a way. And I was also thinking that I was also thinking that you were feeling kind of maybe pissed at me and Paul, like as if we hadn't been there for you, because you were saying you don't know all the things I've been going through. And Mom, I know all the things you're going through, right? We talk about them every day. And I said, and that's why I felt so hurt. Like it didn't matter all the effort that I've been putting out, to know these struggles, to help you with these struggles. And I said, look, I know I could just like let it go, and that would be the easy thing to do. But I love you, and I don't want to harbor resentment toward you. Like I actually want to be open and share this with you. And she started to cry, but not in some I feel sorry for myself cry. She just kind of started to cry, and she said, no, you're right. Like in that moment, I was feeling alone and sort of resentful, and I just took it out on you guys, and like, kind of guilty as charged. Like, I can't believe you could see that and read that in my text, but you're right. And everything you're saying is right. And the last thing that I would ever want you to do is feel like, resentful toward me, or feel like I didn't appreciate everything that you do for me. So, it just totally turned things around. And she just shared so much, love and appreciation for me, and also shared that she was, there are just times where she feels so overwhelmed with all the stuff she's going through that she gets kind of bitter and angry and lashes out, even though she knows that my brother and I are, the two most supportive people in the world. So I don't know. That was a long-winded story, but
Well, that was
those are the kinds
fantastic,
of things.
Jill.
Yeah.
That was just so beautiful, so perfect. That's the essence of our podcast.
Yeah, oh my God, think of what the world would be like if every dyad, mother, daughter, spouse, worker, employer could speak to each other in the way that you spoke to your mother. That was so powerful. And lots of
Or
times,
could want to speak to each other in that way.
yeah.
It's not just learning how, but it's wanting to do it, being willing to do it, being willing to do what's necessary to have a loving relationship with somebody you're pissed off at. And what percentage of people in the world want to do that? There was a recent survey, Rhonda, and you know the answer, the exact number of people in the world.
I'll say 0.5%.
Yeah, 0.498 was, like there's only 14 people in the world at this time. And I'm just making a loony statement, but it's just so powerful, the urge to get back at the other person when we feel hurt and angry, rather than to share it, and as a chance to be vulnerable and to have a more loving relationship. And the only reason I say that is because if you, and this probably sounds stupid and is, but if you just look at the world right now, it's like sweeping the world is this temptation toward hostility and disparaging people. And it's fashionable to hate people and to lie about people and to put people down and to defend ourselves. And there's a place, I'm sure, for defense. There's a place for everything in the proper context, but we're getting real thin on love thy neighbor these days, and I am really concerned about where it's all gonna end up. When I look out my window right now, I see some beautiful trees in our backyard and some water that I put out there in a bowl for the animals. And but sometimes when I look out, I say, boy, I hope we don't get a North Korean missile with a hydrogen bomb today. Pointing down in the San Francisco Bay Area or something like that. I'm probably being real corny, but I don't think I am. I mean, and this it's all about love and kindness and respect for other human beings. And I don't know anyone more than you two who exemplify that. but we fall out of grace and into hatred so easily, into defense and into fighting.
And even to
David, shut up!
brushing
You're
things on,
so
and even
elderly and demented babbling. Okay.
sorry, I was going to
Okay.
say, David, and even another, you pointed this out, but even another form of aggression, which is just brushing things under the rug, right? Like, how
Yeah.
much easier is it to just not say anything? And that kind of brings us back to your original topic, Rhonda, right? Like, how much easier is it to just not share feelings and not give feedback, right? Like, someone could argue it would have been so much easier for me to just show up and, just
Write
pretend
her
it
off.
hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jill, I'm listening to you tell that story and thinking, what must it have been like? I'm thinking, what would it be like if one of my sons said something like that to me? And just the gift or the ability to repair something immediately and to continue. I don't know. Now I sound kind of sappy too, but what it is so easy to fall back to anger and like brushing things aside. Like, is it courage, or what was it that led you to actually share your feelings so openly with your mother? Because I had a mother-in-law who was kind of, difficult, and I never shared my feelings the way you did. That was my mother-in-law.
Yeah. I don't. It's a good question, and I saw you getting kind of tearful.
Yeah, kind of
Rhonda, right?
teary-eyed
Like,
thinking about it.
I'm just curious. What is it that's coming up for you as you're feeling emotional with this topic?
Well, being on, I never really had those conversations with either of my parents, and I'm sure that kept us from feeling close. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just kind of wondering what it would have been like if I had had the courage or the skills to have that kind of a conversation with either of them.
Yeah.
And also just how I hope that if I do anything to offend my kids, that they are willing to talk to me the way you talk to your mom.
Right. I love that. I mean, I love thinking about it that way. That's where we say, like, we want feedback, right? Like, if you can be the kind of person who is really open to feedback and really non-defensive, then you invite those kinds of close, authentic relationships, right, into your life. And I guess that's part of the answer, is that I do think my mom is really open, and I know, would not, just generally speaking, is not defensive. And it truly felt like it came from a place of love. Like, I do feel like it's really hard for me. I am like you, David. Like, I am very direct, and it's impossible for me to be fake with people. And, I just brushing things under the rug. I think that's why I became a therapist. Like, I go for the emotion, I go for the openness, the authenticity. Like, I just have no interest in being in a fake relationship. I want people to be direct with me. I want to be direct with them. But again, I also trust myself that I have the skills, which I totally learned from you, David, to be loving in my directness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Loving, and I like the authentic. Like, sometimes when we're talking about the 5 secrets, somebody who's just learning them say, oh, it sounds so robotic. Now I have to say all 5 of these things. And how do I make it so I'm not like a robot? And I say, oh, just with experience and practice. And what you said to your mother was just the embodiment of that. Like, I could hear all the 5 secrets, and in every way you sounded loving and authentic. And
well, what technique did Jill use that made it authentic? Because there's one of the 5 secrets is the one that makes it authentic, and Jill certainly used that one.
The I-feel statement.
Yeah, right.
Was beautifully said, and you didn't hold any punches. Like, you said you felt hurt and discounted, but you also said you felt angry, and you didn't have any fear about expressing your anger.
Yeah. And again, I do think what I've learned from you, David, is, we can act out our anger. That's totally different than sharing the feeling. To say, I feel heard and I feel kind of angry with you, is not attacking someone. But to be angry, to act angry, to be nasty and argumentative, and to express, to be resentful in practice is just so totally different. So I do think sharing a feeling is not so scary. Sorry, David.
You can attack with your anger and negative feelings, or you can share them in a loving spirit. And that's a competition between two powerful forces within us, and the force of let's attack. And you can attack by withdrawing, by refusing to say anything, or by lashing out at the other person, or hitting them, or saying something to put them down. That force wins almost every time. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not promoting that, of course, but
Right.
because people will listen to the podcast and say, "Oh, I'm one of the ones who goes in that warm, respectful way," or "I'm going to be just like Jill." But it's easier said than done, because it means saying no to that powerful force inside of us that wants to get back at that other person and put them down and jab them a little bit, to hurt them a little bit with our anger, or hurt them a lot, maybe, because we're so convinced. We develop a picture of the other person in our mind, a label of we see the person as a jerk, as a this, as a that, and then we think that distortion in our mind is reality. But
The other
it's
thing,
not. It's just a picture that we've drawn of the other person.
well, and I was going to say, and then the other thing that I think is, I think if I'm reflecting on what I said to my mom, the other piece is that I did start with disarming and sort of feeling empathy toward her. And that also, David, speaks to what you're just saying of like, we do also have to see the world through the other person's eyes. So if you think about it, I mean, I think I started with something like, I can imagine when you sent that text to us that you were feeling really lonely and overwhelmed, right? With all the physical problems that you were having. So I kind of give her, I mean, again, it wasn't like strategic, but I disarmed and I saw the world through her eyes. And so what is it? It's almost like it gives her an excuse for doing what she did. I'm not like, you're bad. I'm like, I totally get why this happened, but here's the impact that had on me, right?
Yeah, and you could call that forgiveness, or you can call it empathy. You can give that a lot of names. And again, that's something that we resist. Because if you say to an angry person, "Would you like to see the world through the eyes of the person you're so angry with?" I say, "F you, no, go suck on a worm or something."
Right.
Well, also,
people
I like
don't want to do that. We fight against enlightenment.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes for people to actually see it too. And we talk about this in our training groups, right? Like, try to see the world through the other person's eyes. Try to really get the other person's experience. It's actually hard.
Yeah, it is.
Your description of the attack versus loving, that force, was so powerful. That really struck me. And I think I err on the side of, or the first, we talked about this last week too. I err on the side of the attacking or defending.
Defending, yeah, you do a lot of defending.
And I think in a way it's like there's sort of this fear of being weak.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That reminds me my list of 12 reasons not to treat the other person with respect. 12 really good reasons. Maybe I should put that in the show notes.
Sure. And listening to you talk to your mom, not being in the same room, but listening to you describe how you talk to your mom, and it was anything but weak and defensive and attacking. It was 100% loving, and yet it was really clear. And I don't know, that wasn't not forceful, but it was just so honest.
Yeah.
Without being all those, like the other things playing underneath it, like defending or weakness or this or that. It was just so, I don't know, the strength within it, within the love from it. I don't know if I'm making
like
sense.
That the irony is that there's strength in that loving position, right? We don't have to attack in order to be strong or defend in order to be strong.
Right.
Yeah. And also, I think that seeing for the first time is sometimes important. Like that we're privileged because we can see you in action today in the podcast, Jill, or in the Tuesday group when you give negative feedback, and we can see the power that you have through the respect that you win instantly. But many people may never have seen that with their eyes. So that's an experience that they've never had. That's probably another aspect to it. They've just seen people argue and try to use power, and that's the way America is. We try to use power, exert power throughout the world to win the world's love. We'll kill a few more and then you'll love us. Oh, a few isn't enough. Well, we'll kill tens of thousands more, and then you'll love us. And we're constantly exerting our power, thinking that somehow. I mean, we're not the only ones doing that,
Right.
and I don't mean to be overly critical of America. But it's this idea that I've got to be kick-ass to have power, and then people will admire me and love me, and I'll be a kick-ass person.
But to your point, like you said, you started out that by saying that people may not have seen it, right? Like it's not if it's not modeled for you, or if winning by defeating is what's modeled for you, versus like winning by connecting
surrender
or something, or submitting, or I don't know how
with love,
Yeah.
But you didn't submit. You won by love,
right,
and respect.
Yeah. Directness, honesty, love. Yeah.
But it's going into a different dimension of winning or losing. It's going, you can win or lose. That's where people are at. And this is going up higher into a third thing. I think it was in Feeling Good Together. I'm not sure. I had the dumbbell and the egg thing, a dumbbell that weightlifters lift. It's a bar with, you can have two globes on other end, and one is I'm no good. That's the submissive thing, giving in, losing, and the other is you're no good, and that's the superior, entitled, aggressive dimension. And people think they can only go back and forth, but above them there's the egg, which is half of listening and empathy and sharing, and half empathy and half sharing your feelings, assertiveness and empathy, and the egg of respect. Kind of corny, but it really says it all. And some people don't realize that there's this higher reality that one can experience, and that's what we're talking about today. Does that make sense, Rhonda?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I also think that some people really, really want others to understand them. They want to be understood. And I also think that comes from being willing to understand others. So I don't mean to take this in a tangent, but I think those two things are like, I think of myself as someone like I care deeply about being understood. It feels really sad and hurtful when I feel misunderstood. I think we've talked about this a little bit, David, but I always think that like being understood by other people comes from first making an effort to understand them, right? To like really understand others and see the world through their eyes and connect with them. And then through that, people are able to understand you.
And sometimes that doesn't take a moment, or sometimes that doesn't come in a second or two. Like you really have to give that some effort to completely understand the other person's point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that requires a demand, a motivation, a powerful motivation, and you have to give what you want to receive. I mean, we say these things; they sound so effing wimpy and stereotyped, but they are very true at the same time.
Yeah, and it's like a muscle that you have to keep working on.
Yeah,
one of like I didn't really grow up with a lot of this type of conversation. There was a lot of negativity and criticism and anger, and I learned to defend myself from a really early age. And that what you're teaching, David, and what you're modeling so exquisitely, Jill, it's I've really had to spend a considerable amount of time learning it, and making sure I don't say anything before I really think about the kind of person I want to be and what I want to say.
It's
and
like
you've actually pursued it with your martial arts training, Rhonda, too.
What?
Right?
I don't know. You
Oh,
guys were talking over each other, so I didn't hear you.
oh,
Wait, say it again, David.
oh, okay. I was going to say, Rhonda, that you pursued that defending yourself also with your martial arts training.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
It's been a huge part of your life.
absolutely. A huge part of my life,
Um,
and it still is. Yeah, I have that part of my life really well established. I need to develop this other part of my life.
well, I once went to in Phoenix. 2 summers I went to the Y for karate training for some police officer,
Oh wow.
and the first thing he taught us, if someone's threatening you,
Just speak to them before you do anything to them.
no, it's
What?
the first rule of karate:
Hmm.
get the hell out of there as fast as you can,
Oh
run the
yeah.
opposite direction.
Run.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
about killing the other person. It's about not getting into that world. But then if you have to, then you've got it. Because you have the inner strength. You know the techniques.
And
That was a waste of time, but
I was wondering, Rhonda, should we go back to your original example and maybe think through, like, so your group members needed to give, or we would want your group members, and people face this at work all the time, I think, like, to be able to give critical or negative feedback, right, to someone after a presentation, and like what, and they were afraid to, or they chose not to, and maybe we can just talk through what they could have said that would have been helpful.
yeah, like one of them said, I didn't learn anything new. How could that be expressed differently? I love this, Jill.
Yeah.
What could we say in place of that?
Well, first of all, I guess what I would say is just starting with the, I thank you so much for giving this presentation. I really appreciate whatever it is that you could find that would be stroking or disarming,
Yeah,
or like it was your
yeah,
first time presenting and that took a lot of courage, or, like
yeah.
something that's
And
true and authentic.
you did a great job of summarizing some of the things we've been learning.
Right. Exactly. And then
And
maybe saying I would have liked, or what did they say? I didn't learn anything new. So yeah, I might have liked a deeper dive into, what, I don't know, the disarming technique, or more examples that could have provided me with new information, like somehow
yeah,
emphasizing what I would have liked to
yeah.
have seen.
Or I would have liked to have practiced some of these
Mm,
techniques and pair into groups of two, something like that. So that would be nice. You didn't explain anything in a way that I could understand.
mm,
And because we've kind of said that to someone who was a guest on our show once that you might remember, whose name I will not repeat. Uh, but what would be a kindly way of saying that?
So
Well, I have an idea.
Jill, would you always start with something stroking and appreciative?
I
Yeah,
mean, I think so. I think that's the right way to do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how would we say, Rhonda? You didn't explain anything in a way that I could understand. What would be a
Well,
flattering?
you know, I really appreciate the effort you put into, creating this presentation, and I loved the PowerPoint presentation that you did. I loved the graphics. It was so fun to watch. Um, I might have been, I might have lost my focus at in part of the way, but I really didn't understand some of the points that you were trying to make, and I was wondering if there was another way. No, I'm gonna just stop there. I might have lost my focus, but there was a time when I didn't really understand what you were teaching.
That's not bad. I would have said there was a time that I didn't understand what you were saying, and some of the others might have caught on more easily than I. But it sounded so important what you were teaching. I was just dying to learn, and maybe if you get the chance, you could try explaining that again. Think about me as like a fourth grade student and explain it to me in a really simple way, because I'd be thrilled to be able to grasp that. You seemed excited about it, and it seemed pretty awesome. How's
Mm,
that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, what you did was you weaved in a lot of stroking. Like every other
Yeah.
sentence was a stroking. It was a
Mhm.
positive, respectful statement.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
we're kind of basically doing like stroking, and we're trying to be really specific, right? So we're not
Yeah.
saying you did a bad job teaching. We're saying I
Yeah.
had a hard time understanding when you taught A, B, and C, right? So
Yeah.
I
When
do
you were
think the more
talking about
specific, the
uh,
better.
when you talked about inverting the Gaussian matrix and how critical that is and the derivation of that some equation, it was mind blowing, so mathematical and amazing. But I don't know what a Gaussian matrix is or what it would mean to invert one. Can you explain that to me a little bit? Because I'd love to tell my friends about inverting a Gaussian matrix.
Yeah.
Okay, Rhonda, I loved what you were saying a little while ago, but to be honest with you, it was really boring. How could we redo that one?
Um, well, again, I really appreciate, David, the effort that you put into this, and I know you chose a topic that you really loved, and that you were really eager to explain to teach it, and I was really eager to learn it too. And it was
And it was damn boring.
and it was a little flat. I'm wondering if there's a way that you could have taught it with more interesting examples, or with paying more close attention to your voice tone or your facial expression, because you had so much information, but because it was a little flat, it was hard to pay attention throughout the whole class. I don't know, I'm like so much worse than you guys.
I didn't think that was bad, actually. I mean,
It's a good
I
first
thought that
step.
was,
Good first
yeah.
step. Okay, good.
Um,
Okay, David, sorry that last class you taught was so boring. Jeez.
yeah. Well, to quote the Buddha, go screw yourself. I think I might say, boy, the topic that you were after, that you were teaching there, sounded like it was going to be tremendously exciting. But then when you were teaching it, you didn't. I didn't get that same excitement that I was hoping for. Uh, and I was just wondering if there would be ways to present this same important material with a little bit more drama, pizzazz, or humor, maybe through a personal example, something where you shared that you had made that error and how badly you felt, and then how you had turned it around, or something like that. I
Mhm.
think could add tremendous drama, because you have so much to share. And half of it's show business. And if you added a little show business, your content is just some of the greatest content around. How's
Mm,
that?
That was
fantastic.
great.
Yeah.
Would you say
Um,
That was
anything
great. And
different,
I would
Jill?
say, specifically what was different was, Rhonda, you were trying to find a nice way to say like it was flat, whereas David was saying more of what he would have liked to have seen, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
were saying, instead of telling them how bad the thing is, can we tell them what we were hoping for or how we would like it better? Because that's what David was like. It was interesting. It's an interesting topic, but I would have liked to have seen, a little more drama, or a better, more exciting examples, or, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
yeah.
it's kind of trying to create almost like a dangling the carrot, right? We're like trying to show them what it is we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So rather than say what was wrong, you're explaining what it is that you're hoping for.
Yeah, how they could have even made it
Mm-hmm.
greater.
Better.
You,
Yeah.
what they say is a sign that the speaker is boring is when people in the audience start to fall asleep.
Yeah.
You know what the sign that a speaker is really boring?
They have fallen asleep? They're snoring?
No, when the speaker falls asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, did we give a good answer to the topic for the day, Rhonda?
I think you gave a superb answer, both of you, and I really appreciate, everything that you each said. And Jill, thank you for the example with your mother, and David, thank you for the wisdom that you shared.
Well,
And Jill,
I'm glad I pushed this topic, Rhonda. I know you didn't want to do it at first, and I kept saying this is going to be the greatest topic. But all joking aside, I think it is hugely important, and there are things you can learn and practice to become really good and more in the direction of Jill in giving negative feedback. But the issue is, do you want to do it? And it means giving up that urge and gratification of punching the other person verbally and putting them down and being aggressive and acting out your anger and dissatisfaction rather than sharing it. And it is so easy to rationalize that if you're mad at somebody and what they're saying offended you, that you tell yourself, well, this person doesn't deserve my respect, so I'll try to remember that list of 5 good reasons not to treat the other person with respect, because that's the resistance that everyone will put up when it comes to trying to implement what we're attempting to teach in today's podcast.
I would just wanted to add that I agree with you, David and Rhonda, that the motivation has to be there, right? We have to want to feel close and be connected.
Yeah.
In order to do any of this, in order to give feedback kindly, in order to receive feedback kindly. But I will say that if the motivation is there, truly the way that I learned the 5 secrets of effective communication, which we're talking about, was not only directly from you, David, but from the book, Feeling Good Together. So I always say, and this is 100% true, that when I first started training with you, David, and learning the 5 secrets, I bought that book. I had it next to my nightstand. One of the things I love about Feeling Good Together is the second half of it gives specific examples. Each chapter is like dealing with a narcissist, dealing with someone who's competitive, etc.
Dealing with a complainer.
Exactly,
someone,
a complainer,
someone
so kind
angry.
of like almost all the case studies. And if I would have a complainer or a narcissist or a competitive person in my life, I would like go to the chapter and I would devour it and then I would practice it. So, the motivation has to come from within, but the skills can be learned 100%. And I think Feeling Good Together, which is a different book than Feeling Good, I think is a really great way to learn it and practice it.
Thank you. Yeah, and you can get it on Amazon. And if you do it, and if you do the written exercises when you're reading, because it's filled with written exercises. What would you say if your son says this to you, or if your patient says this to you? Write it down, and then you can read the answer. That's where the learning really occurs.
Yeah. Whew. I feel like I have to take a deep breath. Thank you so much. This was really impactful, and I really, really appreciate you both.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Rhonda, and Jill. It's always such a joy when you're on a podcast. You just breathe life into whatever we're talking about, and joy. And you're such a clear teacher, and your spirit is such a beautiful one.
Thank you guys for having me. I always love every minute of it, and I really appreciate both of you. So thank you.
Bye-bye. We'll see you all. Thank you, all of our listeners, too. We love you all. And if you have suggestions for podcasts you'd like to hear, we love that. And that helps us bring you something that would mean something to you and that you'd enjoy.